Hello, hello. This is Justin Colletti of SonicScoop, and today I've got a special guest with me. It is the Wizard of Cubase, the guy who knows Cubase, I think, better than probably anyone else on the planet, Mr. Greg Ondo. He's been on the channel before, and whenever he has been, it's been a huge hit, and he's going to be taking us through what is new in Cubase 15. And before I get into that, first of all, Greg, great to have you here.
Great to be here.
All right. And second of all, for those of the people in the audience who aren't familiar with Steinberg's Cubase, it's one of the most popular DAWs in the world, I think for good reason. Can you just give me the quick pitch for what you think makes Cubase a successful DAW and who you might recommend it to and why? And then we'll get into all of the new tricks, tips, and features for the Cubase diehards.
Yeah, I think Cubase offers like a wide variety of workflows. I think some programs often pigeonhole you into, I hear a lot of people, I use this program for audio, but I use this one for MIDI. I use this one for scoring, and this one maybe for, mangling loops. And it's like, why are you running four programs if, shouldn't your main program be able to do all those things and be able to kind of interact in really kind of musical solutions that can solve problems. So I think whether you're just kind of, making beats or you're really fine-tuning a vocal performance or writing a song, getting inspiration to, full scoring, that, Cubase is a wonderful solution.
Yeah, it is beautiful. And it's one of these things where I've got to say I'm always impressed with Cubase because I feel like you're adding new features often sooner than other DAWs. And I think it's been really responsive to what actual users in the field are asking for. And it's just amazing how quickly you integrate things and sometimes how much more quickly than other DAWs. So
yeah, and I think Steinberg has a long history of innovation as well,
Yes.
kind of defining the feature set for, what DAWs are doing.
100% to a degree. I think a lot of the other popular DAWs are following Cubase's lead in many ways, and maybe we'll see some more of that today with the new features that are coming out in 15.
Yeah.
So I think we'll devote the rest of this to basically looking at new tricks, new fun things we can do with 15. This is going to be especially interesting to people who are already using Cubase, and if you haven't used it before, maybe you'll be interested just to see features that could be coming to your favorite DAW years from now. But before we get to that, I just want to give a quick shout out and thanks to Steinberg. One of the reasons we're doing this stream is that Steinberg were sponsors on MixCon, our annual event where we are doing master classes with major mixing engineers. And I just want to bring up here real quick that we are giving away licenses to Cubase along with other software program, with speakers, a whole bunch of other stuff. If you go over to mix-con.com, that's mix-con.com, go and sign up for the giveaway there because we're giving away more than $10,000 worth of free gear with 3 chances to win. We're giving away studio monitors, we're giving away high-end headphones, we're giving away a whole bunch of plugins and licenses to Cubase Pro now in version number 15. So check that out over at mix-con.com, and also check out, of course, steinberg.net, where you can check out Cubase and get a overview of all of these new features. But right now, let's dive in. We're not going to just get the overview. We are going to get the deep dive. So let's get right into it. Greg, if you'll start taking it away and showing us some of what's new here in Cubase 15.
All right. So we'll take a kind of different, one of the things I like to show Cubase is how it works for kind of different user groups. So we'll walk through some different scenarios, maybe like people that aren't musicians who are musical and want to create music on their computer, but maybe they're more kind of mouse and keyboard oriented. We'll look at some a lot of people will have vocals. How do we handle vocals? How can we handle when we record bands and they don't play with a tempo or click track, and some score and some stuff for film composers as well. So the first thing I want to start off is maybe how we could start with making a easy drum beat. And one of the things that was incorporated in the last version of Cubase that's been expanded is what we call it a drum track. So it's so integrated that it's not even like a virtual instrument by itself. So when we come over here, we could just right click and we could add a drum track. And when we start with the drum track, it'll be kind of blank like this. And we'll say, okay, maybe I want to add a kick drum. So I could just say, okay, I want to select between different sounds. And this is drum synthesis going on. And we could also have samples. So let's say I want to select my C1 pad. And now I could just double click. And as we do that, we could just load up the particular sample here. Second. All right, so now I could play this particular sample. And when we do this, we could just say, just sharing one thing off real quick. All right. So I want to just play this particular sample. Now, if we want to actually just kind of shape this sample a bit, all we have to do is if we want to adjust maybe, our amplifier, we could add distortion. If we want to tune, so kind of very easy. Now let's say, okay, I want to drop in like a snare sample. I could just drag and drop samples and be able to trigger those. Or we could just say, okay, now I want to choose a synthesized drum sample. I want to come over, let's click on a pad and we could have hi-hats. So we could just come right over here. So kind of all your typical drag and drop functionality and synthesis functions. Now, when we want to, I just loaded up like one of the presets here. And let's say we want to program a pattern. One of the things that we added is instead of thinking, okay, I'm playing an electronic drum kit or I want to program like old school MIDI, we have what we call just a pattern editor. So when we do this, we can just have an editor that's built right into the particular track. We can see all the names from our particular sounds. And what we want to do is kind of be creative with this. So I will just kind of hit play. And let me just go to... So I'm just going to come right over here and let's just say I want to put in a kick on beats 1 and 3. All right. And maybe I want a snare on 2 and 4. So I'll come right over here. Now, if this is too hard, we could also just go to our hi-hat. I could say, give me a hi-hat on every quarter note, or every third note, or every second note. And if I wanted to say, okay, let's just take this and I want to put in kind of little fills here. I want to adjust the velocity. And let's say, okay, maybe I want my snares to be like a little louder. So I'm going to take my snares, right click, and I'll say, let's double the snares. And I'm going to say, let's just come over here, copy that to my clap. So now we could just have our clap going on. Now let's say, what would it be like if I wanted to have like maybe a different polyrhythm going on? So I want to come over here to a conga sample, and let's say I want to put in maybe eighth note triplets on this. And if I want to just adjust the velocity, I could just kind of click directly on the notes. I could also just kind of click on the notes, and if I wanted to, just place them, I could also just come right over here. And let's say like maybe on this snare hit, I want this snare to be louder, but we could also put in like repeats. So I could say, let's put in a couple repeats there. And we could also, say, let's put in another conga, but instead of 16 divisions, I want this to be 11 divisions. So this is always going in intervals of 11 and repeating. And if we want to change, like, okay, I want to take this lane, and I could actually just say, play that lane backward. Or play the lanes forward and backwards and alternate. Now let's say if I don't ever want to be like super lazy, I could actually just come right over here and just have Cubase generate a random pattern for me. And say, okay, maybe I like this, let's put in some more kicks. And say, okay, I don't like some of the sounds, and I could just come over here and just kind of randomly put in patterns, or we could just choose to do a new pattern. So, okay, I want to do 4 on the floor for my kick, and say our snare. And if I just wanted to drag across, let's say for my hi-hat. So stuff like this is just like super fast and easy, and it's just fun. And even if you're like a diehard musician, you could come over and just, start making stuff that you wouldn't do in kind of a musical context. Now, if I wanted to listen to this at like half tempo, I could kind of decouple this and say, okay, what would it be like if I listened to it at half tempo? And I don't have to worry about any steps. I could just come over and just kind of change those different elements right there. I could also select a particular pad and add swing if we wanted to. And if I slow the tempo down, everything is automatically going to just slow right down. Now, if we wanted to do this, one of the things that we've added in 15 is people are like, okay, I like this concept, this paradigm of working. I'm not a musician. I didn't go to, I didn't play piano, but I know rhythm. I know kind of music. I know what sounds good. Is now we could have what's called a pattern mode. And this is a melodic mode. So, and we have two different modes where it could be monophonic or polyphonic. So I'm going to choose this. And let's say we have a lot of people that, that don't understand music and maybe they're afraid so that they're going to be out of key. So we could say, let's give it a scale. So what I want to do now is, as we program, I could just say, okay, I want to start, let's say from D1, and I'm just going to program. And now every note that I put in, now let's say I want this note to be longer. I could hold down my Alt or Option key and just simply drag. And if I like this pattern, I could, let's say, duplicate it and say, okay, now I just want to add some additional parts, like a variation. But we could also just come over here and say, okay, let's go to generate steps. So I could actually do different shapes. So I want to go up or down. Or if I just want it to be completely random as well. And then I could just simply go back to other patterns if I want and just have multiple patterns. Now, once these patterns are created, I could just simply drag them right onto our project window if we wanted to, so that it could be working kind of within our linear format, or it could be just completely non-linear synchronized with your sequence. So we could do, not only kind of drums, but we could say, okay, let's do this as melodic figures. But let's say, so we saw monophonic. Let's say we go to like a synthesizer patch, and let's choose, and we have the choice here. Okay, do we want it to be drum based or melodic? And if I start with drums, I could turn it into melodic. And then if I say, okay, I want to do mono, I could then turn that into poly. But I can't necessarily turn poly into mono, but it's pretty understandable. So let's say at this point, I switch it over to polyphonic mode. Let's just roll the dice and see what it gives us. Okay, and as we do this, let's listen to it. And we could choose, it's going to have the same scale that we had before, so it's going to kind of work musically. If we wanted to do like step sequencing, we could just click on the little stair steps here, and then we could use a MIDI controller to input the notes if you wanted to. You don't really have to do that, but let's say, maybe I like this idea. Let me just add two voices. Add 3 voices, and let's just do a variation on it. Let's say I want it to be less dense. And then if I have notes that are kind of, tied together, I could come right over here to my edit, and I could say, let's just tie all the notes that are next to each other. So very easily, we could just come up with fresh, easy ideas. And sometimes we were like, oh, is that really only for like, hip hop or EDM type of work? take the bass part and put it for a cello, and you have a really interesting soundtrack. So use kind of different tasks when you're working with this, and you come up again with like really fresh ideas. Now, one of the things that we also want to do in Cubase 15 is just, we always have like so many ways to access music and the volume and panning, but I could now just come over here and I could just say, we have our volume controls right on the tracks themselves. So very easy to drag and drop and copy these patterns that we create in kind of a non-linear perspective and drop it into our linear perspective. And if I want to do this, I could just say, as we drop a pattern in directly onto our part, we can copy it. And we all have the ability to just say, okay, I want to take all these patterns and just convert it into normal MIDI if we wanted to. And if I don't like what I did, I could just undo and have everything back to where I was. Now, another aspect that we started with Cubase 14 is to be able to kind of work with different modulators. So when we want to make things that are kind of more interesting sounding, like let's say, sorry.
Yep.
Can you still see my screen? Okay.
Yep. You got it.
Okay. I just hid something so I can get to that part. All right. So when we have modulators, we could do stuff like, okay, let's come over and listen to, let's say, our bass part. All right. So I'm going to open up the instrument here. And let's say I want to just have like the filter just automatically change like this, but I don't want to have to automate this like a robot. So what I could do is just come over here and I could say, okay, let's go to an LFO. And what I want to do now is I could click on the plus sign and I could say, let's just move this parameter. And we could say, okay, I want this to do whole notes. Or if we want it to be like really fast, let's try eighth notes. And we could change our shape if we wanted to. So let's say if we make this a little slower. Now what's really cool is there's a new modulator. So let's say if we kind of close this modulator and we could actually just replace it. So we're going to have like, I think, just a whole lot of different modulators. One of my favorite ones now is called a morph LFO. So let's say I want and we'll assign the parameter here. So I want we'll do the LFO here and I want to assign this to, let's say, our cutoff. So as we do this, we'll play, and we can see that this is over like a measure. We could increase and open up that filter. But let's say if I wanted to have a different filter, so we can see that's basically increasing over a measure. But let's say I wanted to have a different LFO shape, and let's make it a quarter note. So let's say this LFO is like this, and we'll make it an eighth note here. But what I could do now is morph between these two different LFO shapes. So if I'm on this side, we could do I could unlink the timing. So as we do this, we have, and now I could morph to the other LFO shape.
Now I have to ask the question of, can you put an LFO on the LFO morphing control? That would be meta.
Yes, you can. And then you could have 7 LFOs and control them from a macro knob.
Wow.
So you could see how this flexibility and just this really total creativity. And, if you want something just completely random, you want to randomize a reverb even on a pop ballad, just so it's not playing the same thing. You want to grind filters. There's all sorts of amazing uses of modulators. And, so again, when we see this, we started with like 6 modulators in Cubase 14, and we've added randomizer, wave, fold. There's a whole scripting area, crossfaders, the morph LFO that we saw sample and hold. So all these great different, you could make your own modulation shapes. You could sidechain into it. So again, all this time I haven't actually touched a MIDI keyboard, but we could do like a whole song and make it interesting and develop that song very quickly just using kind of the new pattern editor and modulators.
Beautiful. Yeah, I think
Any quick
that's one of the things I've been most excited about so far is these dual LFOs with the morphing between them. And I also love the layout. I don't think I'd seen it before when you were showing the drum machine mode, where we could basically, I think, create polyrhythms more easily than ever before, because you could have one channel that was basically going 16 steps and another channel beneath it that was going at 11 steps. And I haven't seen those kinds of dual speeds in the same drum editor before. And it just blew my mind to see that. I'm not sure if anyone else has done it, but to me, it's new. And really opens up possibilities for people who want to do polyrhythmic kind of evolving. Yeah,
and
stuff
polyrhythms are like easy to do and just make things, like if you put 5 against 8, put 7 against 4, stuff like that just kind of adds that, like little bit of uncertainty musically, but still is like its own repetitive pattern that all kind of fits together. So.
Yeah. Well, I want to let you get into the other new things. Before we do, I just want to take some audience questions about the stuff that we've covered so far. Esco Royalty says that the last bit sounds like a vintage Sonic the Hedgehog instrumental. There were definitely times I was getting retro video games out of some of the random patterns, which I thought were super cool. And I love that idea of taking some of the random musical patterns and then adjusting them, using them as like a starting point for creativity. Steven says, are there presets for these modulators?
Yeah, there's presets for the modulators and, for that. And also the patterns now have presets. So the first one, when the first generation pattern editor came, you couldn't save presets. You drop it into the project window and save it there. But now we could save presets, and the presets will automatically load up not only the instrument, but all the audio effects and audio characteristics of the instrument that it's modulate, that the pattern is triggering. So you could just interchange different patterns, and there's a lot of patterns that are available directly inside of Cubase as well.
Gotcha. We've have a bunch of Cubase lovers in here in the chat. Martin says that the first time he used Cubase was version 2.5 in 1994. So yeah, you guys have been around the block for sure. Isomatic says he has Cubasis on his iPad, but hasn't used Cubase yet. For those who aren't familiar with it, can you give us just a quick synopsis of what Cubase is, how it differs from Cubase, and who that might be useful for?
Yeah, Cubase is our kind of our mobile version of Cubase. It's available for iOS and Android. And we realize that, sometimes when you're, and it's, it was designed from the ground up to be a mobile version. And you could actually, write in Cubases and then take those projects and import them directly inside of Cubase. So there's some people that just think of Steinberg as, you make, there are guys that do Cubasis. And they're like, they have Cubase as well. It's like, so you could actually just take your Cubasis project. So, a lot of people are just like, you're traveling, you're on a bus, you're on a train, a plane, and you just have that little spark of creativity. You can capture it in Cubasis, and people will finish entire projects in Cubasis and not realize that they could take it into Cubase and do, like even more, but still have all those building blocks that they started with on a mobile version. So even if you're on your phone, you could be like, programming beats and doing all sorts of great stuff. And then when you're home, it's like, now I could do the perfect pristine vocals in my, perfectly treated room. And so wherever you have your creativity, you can just capture it with Steinberg.
Yeah, very cool. And last couple items before we get into some more of the new features. Royal writes in to say, Greg has elevated my production tenfold on Cubase. Love both you guys for all the free education, but he also has a question. He asks, how long will Cubase updates have Windows 10 support? To which I want to ask Royal how much longer you can use a decade-old operating system. But it's also a valid question. I know a lot of us, myself included, like to hold on to old machines for a long time. Is this current one Windows 10 supported with Cubase 15?
I believe it is. I haven't tried it. I moved on myself from to Windows 11 last year, but I think there's still people running Windows 10. And Windows is, even though, you may not get an answer from Microsoft, I think most people are seeing that it works. Like we just until like a couple, maybe 2 years ago, we were still doing, people were running Windows 7 pretty regularly.
Sure.
So,
yeah. And then one last request here is from Musictron. He says, can we get real folder tracks in the mixer? Do you know what he's referring to there and where we have access to folder tracks? And if there's the idea of having them in the mixer maybe and not just your kind of editing?
I know that there's been a lot of discussion with it, and I'm sure that the team is, constantly working on stuff. And when we come out with a new version, that doesn't mean that like all the features in Cubase 15 are frozen at the release date. So Steinberg has done a really good job of as there's like maybe a 15.1, a 15.2 to give all sorts of other features with that. So the program is constantly evolving.
Yeah, I've definitely noticed that.
Steinberg is aware of that, of people wanting that. And they want it to be, if they do it, I think they want it to be really good.
Yeah, makes sense. All right. So I know you have a couple more things to show. I think maybe some that was around mixing in soundtrack formats and kind of other formats. So show us what else is new here in 15.
Yeah, let's take a quick look at some like vocals.
Okay.
Because, a lot of people are working on projects that have vocals and projects that have drums, and other instruments. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at a particular file here. So let me turn off all my loop stuff that I made.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So let's say we have just quick. All right. So let's say we want to just kind of take our vocal file here, and let's say we're starting with like a basic. All right, so now let's say we just want to actually, as we start working, I'm just going to revert this quickly because we changed tempo.
Yeah,
Bear
that
with
makes
me one
sense.
second.
Get our click track linked back up.
All right, so, when we're working with vocals, a important thing is always just to make sure, that, it's the most relatable part of a song. So come over and let's take a look. And people, and I see it like when I played in bands, like people don't know music, they know every word of the song, and they're singing every word in a crowd. So let's say if we want to just come over here. All right, so when we want to, we could have our MIDI editing here, but we could also just double click and go into one of the things that we call Very Audio. And this is, Cubase was the first program that really kind of offered this ability so that we could actually do kind of like our vocal tuning. So I could come right over here and I could say, as we listen to particular phrases, we could say, okay, let's. And I could just kind of select the different phrases here and I could adjust the tuning. So let's say, okay, there's probably some notes that are a little bit out. And just very simply, I could do that. Let's say we have kind of two different modes of working with this. So I could actually just say, okay, we want to do, I want to take the vocal from this point and we see where the vocalist had drifted down in pitch and we could just bring the end up. And if we want to, and we could actually have this like kind of based on colors. So if I move to, different notes, color, and we see the colors change, and we can see that green notes will be kind of out of key, or green notes are in key, and the red notes are out of key. So we could do all sorts of great stuff, like all of your vocal tuning, where you don't have to have another tool for that. Now, let's say we have a piano accompaniment here. I'm going to take this piano, and we have something that we call the chord track. So I'm going to say create chord events. And I could do an audio file, or a MIDI file, and what it's going to do is automatically kind of figure out like what the chords are for particular events, and we could have lead sheets for that. And if we want to, now the coolest thing that I think that we'll see with vocals working in Cubase is going to be this next one, because we often don't have the ability to, like I'm a really good bass player, but I'm not a singer. And we know that when we work with particular vocalists, that it expressing what we want to do and help the vocalist could be tricky. So let's say we want to listen to a little file here. So we want to give a tool to help convey what you're writing is for the vocalist. So let's say, and this is called Omnivocal, and it is a virtual singer plugin that comes with Cubase. If I want to adjust the formant, if I wanted to come over and say, let's just adjust like the vibrato, so if you want to be very Broadway. Now how this works is we just take a MIDI data here. So I'm just going to look at the MIDI part. And as we open up the MIDI part, we could just select a note. So we hear the pitch and we go to the text and we could just enter the text. And that's pretty much all you have to do. And as we do this,
it's amazing that Cubase just includes so many things that people are usually buying additional plugins for. I'm not going to name all of them by name, but the just the very fact that it has the text to vocal synthesis, then the library of voices here, and the fact that you have this additional tuning application kind of built in here. There's so many people using DAWs where these are hundreds of dollars of additional purchases to get the stuff that's just in the flagship version of 15.
Exactly.
But I'm sorry to interrupt. And keep on going. Just
and if you want it to be a female voice, you could switch it to a female voice. But, just having this tool, being able, because so many times, like, the worst thing is, like, you have a song and you can't communicate what you want the vocalist to do. And they come in and they do their own style. And you're like, that's not what I heard. Now what you could do is actually kind of get, just like our orchestral composers, our film composers, they work really hard to do very accurate mock-ups so that the orchestrator can convey that in writing to the orchestra. So, now you could actually, there's a lot of people that will use this for release, and that's fine. But, I think like the most important thing is if you're a songwriter and you let's say you're working in an apartment and you don't have a great vocal, and you don't have the ability to capture that, you could just use this tool and, capture something that's so realistic that you could send it to the vocalist and say, do better than this. This is what I'm thinking. And, a lot of AI tools that I hear don't have emotion. And this is really good, and this is the Yamaha technology. Yamaha's been doing Vocaloid for, I think, 2001, 2002, so they've been working on it well before, any AI, when AI didn't mean anything, so, and again, it's just part of Cubase. So if you want a female singer instead, we could just kind of come right over here and listen to. And then if you want like to do stuff where it's like one word that carries over, like let's say we'll switch back to. So long. I would just come over to the first word and we type in you with a couple of dashes, and then the word after that is the next word. It will just kind of hold that note. It will hold that word over multiple notes as well. So, I think it's great just to have a tool. I think it's the only DAW, I could be mistaken, that, is coming with like a virtual vocalist.
I think you might be right.
So, and again, it's just, being able to deliver these types of solutions. Now, let's say we want to, like, we're recording bands, right? And sometimes bands they're a lot of fun to work with, but sometimes live band recordings and tempos aren't friends.
Right.
It's like, because we want to have that correlation between the bar and beat so that we could edit to their performance. We don't necessarily want their performance to be so rigid. So let's take a look at, like, if we want to do something for working with maybe a band scenario. So I'll just come over here, let's say, and we turn on my click track. And the click track has no correlation whatsoever.
Oh my goodness, yeah. They may as well be on different planets.
Yeah. So a lot of engineers just say, okay, we're going to record and we're not going to have a bar and beat. We're just going to look at time, like we're working with analog tape. And that's fine until you want to do editing that people expect you to. So I'm going to go to my project menu to the tempo track, and I'm going to say, let's do a tempo detection. And now what it's done is it's created a tempo map of every single beat so that we have that correlation. So,
oh my goodness.
And when it does this, it actually kind of just, we don't assume that all music is in like 4/4. So we could just come right over here and just say, okay, let's make, it figures out kind of beat by beat. So we'll say, okay, let's put it in 4/4. And now,
right, so now it knows where to put the accent.
Yeah. And at this point, if we want to have a loop that kind of is following that, I could just say, okay, let's get a drum loop. We could place it in what we call musical mode. I'll just have this snap to the beat here. So now this loop will automatically play in time.
No.
Because now this loop is following the master tempo of what we've done. So
that's absurd. That is absolutely the first time I've ever seen this. I love two things about it. One, yes, you being able to layer on rigid drum machine stuff after the fact to something that wasn't done rigidly. And also without forcing the band to play to a click, having the ability to quickly and easily edit, say, a snare hit, a bass note to fall more on grid without shoehorning the whole band into a completely rigid tempo that they might not be able to do for the entire thing. Man, I didn't imagine that this was possible. And this,
and we
I
could
think
do that for multi-track just as easily as we do for like a mix down file. But now let's say the band was fluctuating too much, but it was such a great take, but it's just a little too much fluctuation. What we could do is go to the audio menu, to advanced, and we're going to say we have this thing called set definition from tempo. And what that's going to do is take all of our tempo values here and put that as metadata into the file. So if I want to come over here, let's say while we're playing, I say, okay, I want to take my tempo and just tighten the tempo up so that it's fluctuating less. Or I want to take the tempo and make it a perfect 120 beats a minute. Let's make it 132. Now it's perfectly steady at whatever tempo we defined, because it's taken that hyper accurate tempo map that was extracted from the file, and then we could speed it up, slow it down, just for audio, just like we do for MIDI. So we have that flexibility. So if you have this perfect take, you're like, oh, and I've been in the studio so many times, like, it was so great. You guys got so excited. You sped up like 15 beats per minute at the end. And it's like, but it's such a great performance. I want to keep it, So when you have that magic, you don't have to lose the take and try to recreate the magic, which probably won't happen again. Sometimes you get that little spark of energy in the studio and you capture that performance and you're so lucky. And then when there's like one element that's a deal breaker, it doesn't have to be a deal breaker.
Right. I also love I'm thinking of other applications of this now where you could say if you had a bassist and a drummer in the band and the bassist was tighter than the drummer or vice versa, you could now create a tempo map from the bassist and then apply that tempo map to the drummer. So you, instead of syncing them both to some external rigid click, you could say, the bass has had a really good feel, really human, but variable. Now let's just massage the drummer so he matches the bass player a little bit. And you can do that with extracting this kind of tempo map. This is brilliant. I think this is going to potentially change the way people edit for the better, where we can make performances better than they would otherwise be without having to turn everyone into robot rock.
Yeah, exactly. And what's also really great about this is taking different takes that were at like slightly different tempos and being able to take the bass from take 3, which might have been like a hair faster, and put it with the drums from take 2, which were slower than all the performances on take 1.
Love it. Where was this 20 years ago when I was recording bands? This is gorgeous.
Oh,
this is.
I know. I was right there with you. It's like looking at the clock, going, "Can you afford to fix this? It's going to take a while."
Yep.
All right, and one thing that was just introduced in Cubase 15, and Steinberg, this is another thing that Steinberg did first, is because we, part of spectral layers is part of our portfolio. Mm-hmm. And with Cubase 11, we actually, included a license of Spectral Layers 1. Now it's called Spectral Layers Go, and that has just such a great extraction algorithm. But a lot of people wanted the simplicity of having it internal, so we still get Spectral Layers Go. But when we want to come over here, we could just say, wouldn't it be cool if we could just separate the stems, and we could select your file and just do stem separation. That's just kind of built right into the particular file. So any file that you want, if you want to just come over and separate stems from it, you could just come over and just choose different elements to separate stems. So again, you could utilize ARA. So if you wanted to do with spectral layers, and spectral layers can do a tremendous amount with utilizing where you could unmix a whole song and then take the drums and unmix like the kick and snare and hi-hat, all those different things. But now we have the audio stem separation included.
Amazing. And again, this is something else that people would normally be spending hundreds of additional dollars to on top of their favorite DAW.
Yeah. So we'll take a quick break, see if there's any questions before we go into some note expression and some film scoring stuff.
Sure, yeah. Let's see what some of these folks are writing in. Jazz Dude says, "Hey, Cubasers. Quaverlove is really happy that the two of us are in the same room together, which is not the first time. I've met Greg in person many times. He's been on the channel a couple other times. If you want to check out other Cubase presentations, he's done one at MixCon in person. And he also did, I think, a debut of Cubase 11 back when that came out here on the channel. It's great to have him back. WonderOrb says it would be great if one could see a list of all the plugins used in a project and how much CPU they use. This would be good when you have a template with 200 tracks and effects and finding out what drains the CPU. Is there anything like that in Cubase?
There isn't, the CPU usage can vary. So, because with VST3 plugins, like you can have the plugins not take any power if they're not doing any processing. So it's not like they're taking power, but in the VST plugin manager, you could actually say, just show me plugins that are used in the active project. So you could filter those out, and you can make your own plugin collections, because we all collect too many plugins, especially this time of year with so many great promotions going on. But, so you could organize all of your presets. And I want to give a shout out to Jazz Dude. He's like our moderator in our Club Cubase live streams, and he's just amazing. So appreciate everything that Jazz Dude does.
Yeah, he's writing in here. He's actually here writing in to say that they don't drain, the plugins actually don't drain the CPU. They're draining the ASIO real-time performance. He says, I can run 500 Cubase plugins with a $500 PC, and I can show you the performance in screenshots. That's interesting. What's the distinction there between CPU and ASIO real-time performance?
Because like audio performance, people often confuse CPU performance with audio performance, So sometimes like your computer may be like at a draw if you put like 16 plugins as inserts on one track, because that one track and every DAW will work the same way, can only utilize one CPU core. And the next track can utilize another CPU core. So if you completely load stuff up, so that way you're like, my computer is running slowly, but I still have all these CPU cores. So, every DAW has to, if you're doing like serial processes, they will kind of basically, work, so that, only one track can access one CPU. And so, so people sometimes, confuse, audio performance from CPU performance. I think the thing that you notice with Cubase, and if you look at all the big comparisons, you'll, especially, there's a lot of great YouTube videos on which programs actually use both the performance and efficiency cores found in computers now, and Cubase does. So we get more out. I just did a presentation this past weekend with a film composer, and she's kind of young, great film composer, does a lot of work. Her name's Chang. She does a lot of work with Junkie XL and has done Sonic the Hedgehog and other films. And she just showed up with her laptop with no hardware and played her whole cue for the demonstration. And she didn't think twice of it. It's like just a laptop, running on battery, saying, "Oh, I'll show you my whole cue, and here's my Dorico score." And it's like, I'm like, "Oh, you're just running that on a laptop?" She's like, "Yeah, of course."
It is amazing how far we've come. My goodness.
Yeah.
Master Nerve writes in to say, "I'm not a Cubase user anymore, but today I am going back after this AI vocal thing is included." He's also curious to know if the tuning that you showed, whether there was an autocorrect function. And I think the answer there is yes. You're looking at what people might consider a Melodyne type screen where you're doing kind of manual adjustment, but there is auto tuning kind of baked into that as well. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Understood. All right. Couple other things here. Wonder Arp says it's a great update. The audio previews in the hub and more modulators is nice. You cover the modulators with some detail here. The audio previews in the hub, is that a new thing that he's mentioning?
Yeah, so the hub, and this is like where people first start their Cubase, and he's like, okay, I want to see my recent projects, and we redesigned this so that it was easier for first time users. And one of the cool things is you could come over here and say, "Oh, what was this project?" And you could actually see this little play, and then you could just click on it and get a preview. What was this project here?
Oh goodness, that's the current state of the mix, basically.
Yeah. So so even if the project isn't open, you're like, okay, I'm working on 10 album cuts, but I forgot what the name of this song is. The artist is going to be pissed. I remember what it sounds like. You can just come over here and just click on the preview and say, "Oh, what is this? Oh, okay, that's the one." Boom, and open it.
Right. Beautiful. Another question here about the AI vocalist. The question is whether it can do other genres such as hyperpop, pop rock, and so on. Are there still additional reasons why people will be looking for additional vocal libraries that would be more advanced than the one built in to Cubase? Because I know you guys had for the longest time Vocaloid, and maybe still have it. Is that still a separate thing? And is there a reason someone would upgrade to Vocaloid separately?
Yeah, Vocaloid is still separate. And I think Vocaloid allows you, I'm not an expert on it, but will allow you to actually kind of, take samples from your voice and be able to do that, and it's just, once we have a tool, it's like, once you have a synthesizer and, let's say you had a DX7, 40 years ago, and you're like, oh, I have these 32 sounds. Who could need more? Now it's like, oh, I need 14,000 presets, or I'm not going to look at it, So people will always want different flavors and additional flavor, different options. But I think having it included, and you could obviously do different genres for it. A lot of people, when they think AI vocalists, they always do really fast dance stuff. And that's why I wanted to do something a bit more emotive, that was a little more realistic sounding. So,
yeah. Louis Che asks whether Cubase 15 has new or improved versions of any of the prior VST instruments from prior versions, or if there's any new VSTs as part of Cubase 15.
So you get new drum sounds. One of the instruments that you get, I think we can show it here, is going to be, we used it in the drum pads, but if you want to look at writing room synths, so this is an instrument that sells for $99, and this is kind of like your great classic, 90s synth sounds, but a very, very easy interface. You're going to have arpeggiator, built-in effects, but kind of classic early 90s synths. Great sounds, very simple interface, and this kind of works as a playback engine. Also, one of the updates that has happened is going to be with Groove Agent, has been updated as well with a lot of new features and kind of resizable user interface. In talking about resizable user interfaces, one of the things that's awesome is like all of, let's say if we open up a plugin, we'll just do one of the new plugins, a dynamic plugin, which is called Ultra Shaper. And what's cool about this plugin is it's an auto gain compressor, so you could get the compression, that compressed sound without having to necessarily like have to do makeup gain afterwards. But all of the internal plugins now, you could say, oh, I want it to be, you have scaling for, and the application itself can be scaled. Also full screen mode on Mac. So if you say, okay, I want that bigger, I don't see well, my eyes aren't good. You could just scale each of the built-in plugins as well.
Beautiful. All right. Well, that's all I've got for new questions here. Guys, keep on typing them in. We'll be taking more questions with Greg here at the end. But you had, I think, a couple more new ideas to show us in 15.
Yeah. All right, so let's take a listen to one of the things that we also want to do is, we have tons of film composers. A lot of people think of Cubase as like a film composition tool. So let's say, like people like Hans Zimmer, Junkie XL, Ludwig Göransson, and these people like are really pushing the envelope technically. So let's say, So one of the things that we want to do is to be able to make instruments kind of more realistic. So as we work with kind of more realistic instruments, what we want to be able to do is, Steinberg invented this technology called expression maps. So when we go to particular instruments, when we open up, let's say, a trumpet, often, the companies have spent a lot of time coming up with all these different articulations. And now we could just audition. So we say, okay, I want to do straight. I want vibrato, flutter, falls, kind of. So all these different sounds are available. And, and people have all these sounds, but they tend not to use them because it's really hard to figure out what key switch is actually sent for that. So we invented this technology in Cubase 6, and it's been kind of radically updated so that when we go to our expression maps, it's much easier to access. We could have different, expression maps can have groups so that we can, but we could see all of the available articulations here, what type of MIDI message it is. If we want to see, what musical symbol do we want to be associated with this? So we go into the score editor. If I use that articulation, I could have that reflected in the score editor. So when we want to change sounds, and this is kind of standard procedure and why so many film composers love Cubase, is we could just come over here to our articulations, and then we could see all of the different sounds and just say, okay, while we're playing this, we'll listen to our trumpet part here. So, we could just come over and we'll just... So say, okay, I hear that trumpet just do a fall, but let me just come over and say, maybe I want the fall to be a short fall instead. So we listen to our trumpet. Okay, maybe the long fall is better. I could just come over here and just switch the articulation. So let's do a shake and see what that sounds like. So now we could go through like when you're doing those string libraries, we're going short to legato and, all these different articulations. And, the library developers spend all this time. So you have that flexibility so you can get it sounding like a real musician. And as we do that, we want to be able to easily access all of the different articulations that are available for you. So great enhancements with expression maps.
That's beautiful. Because so many people using these instruments might not even know all the expressions that are available to them. And this is the best sorted I've seen it for sure.
Yeah, and you paid for it. You have them. Use them. It's like saying, it's like having a car. It's like, yeah, I don't know if I need fourth or fifth gear, so I'm just gonna stay in first, second, and third. It's like you own it. Do it.
Right, and imagine if if you had to reach into your dashboard to shift into fifth, you'd almost never do it. But if it's right there on your gear shifter, you're much more likely to use it. So.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Now, the last thing we'll take a look at here is, so let's say we're, doing our film composition. Steinberg has a program called Dorico, and Dorico is, the most, it's been a huge impact in the scoring and notation market. And last year, Finale, a long-standing scoring application, basically just said, we're not really going to be doing development anymore, and here's a cross grade to Dorico, and we feel that Dorico is kind of the future.
Wow.
So what we did, the Sibelius development team at one point got fired, the whole team. And I think it was ironically maybe on 4th of July, so from in England where they're based. And Steinberg actually hired that entire team, and we said, okay, we know how hard it is knowing like a great team to work with, and they developed Dorico, and we let them say, okay, knowing what you know now with notation, what would you do differently? And they built a monster scoring program with kind of like 2020 sensibilities, not being restricted to painting yourself in a corner from 1980s or 1990s. And now that scoring engine is directly inside of Cubase as of version 14. So when we do this, and what's even better, is so you get the high quality scoring, but we could just simply export the project directly to Dorico. So at this point, if you need to do like your engraving work, you're really tweaky, obsessive compulsive, like this accent needs to be 3 pixels to the left, like those types of work, Dorico is there. But when you start and you look at your music inside of Cubase, one, it looks beautiful, and you could just come over and have really high quality scoring. And a lot of this stuff is making very correct musical assumptions for you, so that you don't have to sit there and tweak a lot of different things. And once you're done, you want to send it to the orchestra, you could just simply export the Dorico project and do your final tweaks to the orchestrator right there, but you don't have to kind of recreate the entire score from scratch, trying to convey what the musicians were doing, if they were started with beats, if they went into working with chord progressions, they went into going into all of the articulations can be carried over, and then delivering it to the musicians. So so what you see with Cubase again is, instead of having to have one program for audio, one program for MIDI, one program for working with loops and beats, one program for scoring, one program for lots of instruments. All of those tools are available in one single program. So, and this is also really important because we've all run into, I call it version-itis. You update your program, and the program got updated because there was an operating system update. So the host program gets updated, but 6 out of 10 of your plugins haven't been updated yet. And then by the time the plugin, this company, and it's really hard to keep up to date with all software updates from operating systems, and this company updated, but this company didn't. Then the new operating system comes out, and the company's like, cool, we got the last operating system working. When everything is in one single unified system, you don't have that kind of anxiety of working with that. And, just thinking about, and some people think of Cubase and they always associate it with like the USB key, which is what our former licensing system was. But now we have Steinberg licensing, and Steinberg licensing, it's kind of like signing into a Gmail account. So it's all kind of online system. So if, people were kind of like, oh, I don't want to get into like a whole, if I lose my key, I lose the program kind of scenario. It's all, when you buy a Steinberg program, you can run the license on 3 different computers, and it's no physical key you have to worry about taking around with you.
Beautiful.
All right, so I think we're right at 6 o'clock. Let's see if there's any other questions. And one other thing I'll point out is, we kind of take a different approach to support. So what we do, for 2 times a week, 4 hours on Tuesdays and Fridays at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time, is we have what we call a Club Cubase live stream. And all we do is people ask questions, and we answer their questions for them live. And then you could watch it on YouTube. So if you're getting into Cubase, if you're a Cubase user, check out the live streams, because you could just go on, and we have people like in the middle of live streams, in the middle of sessions, will ask a question, they get a solution, and they can move on. So we kind of take kind of like an interactive product support very seriously, so we could support our community so that all of our customers can realize their creativity.
All right. Very awesome. Yeah. So definitely take advantage of those. I know that Greg never gets tired of talking about this stuff and showing people how to use it. You just came off before this stream, I believe, a 3.5-hour live stream where you were answering questions from power users of Cubase. Shorter one. Oh my goodness. That's awesome. Let me see if there's any new questions that have come in since our last ones. Royal says, question, I'm broke, but I could use Cubase 14 that he has an older version. Is that, I'm not sure if I understand the question here, Royal. Yeah, if you could retype your question.
One of the things, if you don't have like a lot of money to outlay for Cubase, you can, I think you could get it through Splice. So on kind of a rent to own model. I'm not sure if 15 is there yet. But we have a lot of people that will, kind of do a rent to own model. We generally don't do a subscription because our user base is just like, don't do that, don't make me pay every month, don't do it, we'll hate you. But we realize that sometimes, people may not have, the money to outlay for it, but you could do kind of a rent to own model on Splice. So that'd be something worth checking out.
And there's also additional versions. So there is from $100 is the least expensive version.
Yeah,
we've been looking at
Cubase Elements and Artist, and everything we showed today is in Pro, but a lot of this is also in Elements and Artist as well.
Exactly, yeah. And I would say just 2 or 3 of the things that are included in Cubase Pro 15 pay for themselves immediately in the kinds of additional tools and plugins people often end up buying for themselves. But it looks like even the artist version has the vari audio pitch correction, the audio warp, and audio quantizing. So a lot of stuff that isn't available in a lot of other DAWs. But you can get started
at one level. If let's say you start at Elements and then you jump up to Artist, and then you go to Artist for a year and you jump up to Pro. There's upgrade paths, so you're not really losing any money in your investment as you jump up. So that's kind of like having equity in the Steinberg, in your Steinberg system.
Beautiful. Yeah. All right. Let me see if there's 1 or 2 more questions here for you, Greg, before we let you go. We really appreciate the time. Greg has been literally talking about Cubase nonstop for the past 4.5 hours, if you talk about this stream and the other stream he just got off of. So let me see if there's any more here. Jazz Dude says that there are free 60-day trials at Steinberg, fully functional with no limitations. So Great 2 months of using it, man. The only problem with that is you're probably going to get addicted by the end of 2 months. Quaver Love Studio says that in Cubase 14, there's the ability to disable and enable grouping per project. Will 15.5, maybe a future version, provide the ability to do it per group channel on the mixer? So can you see if you can make that question a little more comprehensible to people on following it? But you're able to
so
enable
I think like sometimes we have like, I think we have processing on groups. So sometimes people will take all their drums and run it through, put it into a group and run 6 plugins on that. And since it's just being processed, there isn't a way necessarily to, to freeze something because there's no data on it. But if you wanted to, if you have a group track, let me just add a group track here. We can show it. And I think I just showed this on the live stream today. So, all you'd have to do is, one of the great things you also have for film composers is a batch export. So I could come over here and just say, okay, I want to take all my tracks, and let's say, okay, I want to take my group channel, and I could render the group channel and say create an audio track, and it will render the group right in. So then you could, disable all of the tracks that were feeding the group. But this is also like a perfect stem maker, so you can say, okay, between the left and right locators, I had, all these files in and out, and I don't want to give up my session to someone. I need to give them stems. You could actually just make perfect stems from the batch export menu here.
Beautiful. All right. I think that may be it for questions. So I just want to say one or two things here real quick before we go. One of them is we are giving away Cubase 15. So if you can't afford Cubase 15 Pro, which many of you are going to be able to, but if you can't, we're giving away a free version. Actually, we might be giving away up to 3 licenses of Steinberg software. Here, we're giving away more than $10,000 worth of free gear. So go to mix-con.com. That's mix-con.com. Sign up for this giveaway. The giveaway entry period is closing, I believe, on November 20th. So this is your last chance for 3 chances to win. Please check that out. Big thanks and shout out to Steinberg for sponsoring MixCon and being part of it and sending Greg over for this. Last couple things. I just want to see if I can remember some of the features that we talked about today. I'm going to rack my brain here for a second and say my favorites were, one, this ability to do, I think, more easily than I've ever seen, polyrhythms inside the MIDI editor. I thought that was super cool. That's a standout feature to me. This new kind of elastic tempo map that you have that will create a tempo map over the course of an entire song, adjusting the tempo map to organically played music, and then the ability to export that tempo map into metadata for the individual audio files, or use that tempo map to make other tracks conform to the live tempo the band played instead of the other way around. I thought that was absolutely beautiful. I had my mind blown just by the idea that you now have both a MIDI and text to vocal synthesis in there, included in it, something that people are used to spending a ton of additional money for, and the improvements again to the note editor and the tuning software you have in there. Those were some of the big standouts to me that just have stuck in my brain. But let us know in the comments and in the chat what have been your favorite updates here in Cubase 15. What are some of your favorite things about Cubase? If you have any more questions, feel free to put them into the comments here, and I can always see if I can get answers for you. Greg, thanks so much for spending an hour with us and showing us 15 inside
pleasure.
and out. Any final notes that you want to tell the people before we let them go?
Yeah, no, I definitely sign up for the giveaway. That's a very great thing in our inflation era now, where everything is getting more expensive. But what I love about Steinberg is it just allows you to work how you want to work, and it really doesn't impose a workflow on you. So even what Justin was mentioning, it's like, oh, you could have the computer follow the band, or have the band follow the computer, or do both. Why not?
Good stuff. Well, thank you so much, Greg, for being here. Thank you guys for hanging out with us. This has been Justin Colletti of SonicScoop with Greg Ondo. See you next time.
Bye.